everybody's moving to the cloud already. So from an infrastructure perspective, if you haven't moved yet, you're at least considering to move there and as soon as possible, because if not, you're going to be left behind. I think it's just that reliability of the platform. When issuers have conversations with outsourced partners, it may be 5-10 years ago, it was cost first, then tech second. Now it's completely switched. Now it's, I want to evaluate your complete tech stack and the infrastructure, and I want to see that it's a scalable infrastructure. And then if I'm happy with that, I'll come to the cost at the end. Because ultimately, if you have issues with your infrastructure and reliability, you're going to lose customers.
Welcome to the Issuer Academy, Paymentology's podcast to innovate, scale, and provide impact. I'm your host, Merusha Naidu. If you're a fintech professional, banking leader, or an innovator in the digital payment space, you're in the right place. Here, we deep dive into the challenges and triumphs of launching next-generation card programs, from virtual cards and digital wallets to cross-border FX solutions. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Issuer Academy. I'm your host, Merusha Naidu, and today we are diving into what it really means to innovate in issuing. From token-first strategies and AI agents to flex cards, subscription managers, and ecosystem partnerships. Issuing is no longer just a back-end function. It's a product decision and a frontline differentiator. So, what does it take to build smarter, more engaging card products and stay ready for the next generation of commerce? Joining me today are two guests who bring both infrastructure and product lenses to this conversation. Firstly, we have Carl Raven, Head of Issuer Enablers at Visa. Welcome, Carl.
Thank you.
And we have Thomas Benjaminsen Normann, Product Director at Paymentology and CPO at Mia Wallet. Welcome, Thomas.
Thank you.
And you're all the way from Oslo, so we're very happy to have you. Let's get straight into it. Let's start with a bit of an icebreaker. We all know I love these. What's one fintech trend that you wish got less attention and one that you wish got a little bit more? Carl, I'll start with you.
The one I'd like to see more is actually, as my role is managing ecosystem partners, I'd like to see actually the enablers behind these issuers and fintechs getting more recognition. They're often the unsung heroes that are doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but often people don't know they're actually doing what they're doing and they're core to making transactions work and in that innovation space. Ideally, I'd like to see less fraud occurring, but rightly so when it happens, of course, it's out there and it's, heavily scrutinized, but I feel like it's still at a higher level than it should actually be. I'd like to see that less.
Absolutely. I think firstly, and obviously being from Paymentology, the innovation that comes from processes really helps issuers drive that innovation all the way to consumers. So I think that's a brilliant topic. And of course, fraud. I mean, it's one thing that we wish would decrease across the board. So absolutely great. Thomas, what do you think?
You're so noble, thinking about fraud and everything. I'm maybe a bit biased. So one of the trends that I was thinking of is like the metal card glamour and investments and so-called innovations being done on the physical card, because I feel like that's more of a distraction and it's a short-term win, which I believe kind of reduces the innovation and investment that should be done on digital form factors instead.
And that's a great point, because usually like you'll see metal cards and it's the shiny cool thing, right? But how much innovation are you packing into a physical card, right?
Exactly.
Perfect. And what would you like to see more of?
Perhaps closer related to what you said, but security in combination with usability. Because security is boring, no one cares until they are a victim of a card fraud. But it's not interesting enough for people to spend their time talking about like the vast majority. And what I see in the market is that often issuers decide either to implement security or usability. In some cases, poor implementations of both. But there are so many great tools out there enabled by, for instance, Visa, that makes it possible to achieve much greater security these days, including great usability. And we should have more focus on these solutions.
I couldn't agree more, because scammers don't stand still. And as innovation occurs and the market kind of shifts with the innovation, so does the way that scammers operate. So it's really important that you're not waiting until you experience significant fraud. Yeah, we certainly see the same thing on our side.
Yeah.
It's got to be ongoing, right? Because as fast as we're innovating, they're innovating even faster, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think we had somebody on the podcast a couple of episodes ago, and one of the things they said is nobody cares about fraud when things are working. And I think that's always the case, right? It's only when things go wrong that you're like, oh gosh, how do we now prevent it? But you've got to be proactive with it.
But there's a much more significant cost when it actually happens than if you had
Yeah.
spent that investment up front. You would actually save money in the long term.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I think for issuers, it's so important to have that mindset
Yep.
rather than trying to, work off the back foot once it's already happened.
Yeah. And brand damage as well. If you get
Yes.
significant fraud, it takes years to overcome that.
Yeah, and rebuild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have a cost to it. So you also need to consider that as an issuer or fintech.
So true. Great points. Now let's look at innovation in issuing. What is driving the change? So from an issuing perspective, we're seeing more demand for smarter, more personalized payment products. But the question, what is driving this momentum? Carl, you work with a range of issuer partners across different markets. What is standing out to you right now in terms of innovation? And are there any common product challenges or shifts in issuer priorities we should be looking at?
So you can't talk about innovation without speaking about AI.
Yes.
I think everybody's talking about that at the moment, and rightly so. It's incorporated into all new products and solutions across the ecosystem. I think what is driving a lot of this demand is the younger cardholders, the Gen Zs, a bit younger than myself, unfortunately. But there's now so much choice on the market. They have an expectation of how that cardholder journey should be for them and how secure and reliable it should be. And it's never been so easy for them to, if they're not happy, to switch. And then they can get a card within a matter of minutes, start transacting within 5 to 10 minutes. So it's really important that's considered and to be dropped.
You're so right. The younger generation doesn't have that same loyalty to a brand. And so they will switch for a more personalized, automated option.
Yep.
That's so true.
And people often use more than one
Yeah.
one card. I mean, most people have a number of cards and they use one for their salary, one for their mortgage, one for their child card, and there's different types of cards that people have.
Yeah.
So they have them for different use cases, but they're very quick to drop that card if it doesn't work or they have a bad experience with it.
Yeah. And we're seeing that happen quite a lot now with the rise of more virtual cards throughout Europe, people using a specific virtual card for a specific card or transaction type.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And Thomas, from your dual role at Paymentology and Mia Wallet, what are you seeing across fintechs and banks you support? How are expectations changing when it comes to launching, scaling, and differentiating products?
Over the time that I've been working in Mia Wallet and Paymentology, obviously focusing on mobile wallets, the interesting shift is when we started back in 2012, it was fiction. In 2014, 2015, it started, but there was still a heavy push from actors like ourselves, as well as Visa and others. Now it's a complete opposite, where it's just like, it's a natural requirement. You don't launch a card program without supporting digital wallets. So that's one trend that over time we've seen. Now we're seeing the kind of the next waves of that with click to pay that is, being launched more or less globally. But there's a big difference between different kinds of issuers. So you have the innovators who are really diving into this. And that's what I find more interesting, how they are looking at, you mentioned subscription management and card controls or even token controls, and how they can create tailored products or products where the user can really configure and manage their spending and get full insight, full control. And that's one trend that we're seeing currently, mostly by the innovators, but that we hope will catch on with the majority soon.
Do you feel like you need to push issuers to drive that thinking more around, be more, create more personalized solutions, or are they actively asking you? Are they pushing like processes to say, I want this, can you do it?
It depends a lot on the type of issue, right? So you have the neobanks, digital banks, who are more forward-leaning and often they may have a benchmark that they're looking at and they are trying to kind of both reach and surpass that benchmark. But we've also worked a lot with tier 2, tier 3 issuers. My experience is that they are more worried about just keeping up with demand from their clients. And often they may have not Gen Z clients, but more Gen X clients that are not driving that as much. And I do see that there's a lot of education required. To your point earlier, the ecosystem partners, and I think it's kind of a good relationship that Visa on the one end and the ecosystem partners on the other end both pushes solutions like this and educate them, because there's so much opportunities that are currently unused.
It's definitely a whole ecosystem play, and we need to all work together. I think a lot of the banks and fintechs, they know what they want to do because they know their customer better than anybody else.
Yeah.
They have so much data and they know what their customers expect, and I'm sure their customers are telling them what they expect, but often they're not sure how to get there or how to do it, and that's where they need the help. So what we see on our side is over half of the issuers on Visa work with a outsourced processor. We see that every year. We see that outsourced shifting. So we see more and more demand for outsourced. So for them, it's really about what's the right partnership and what's the partner going to give them that's going to help them to be unblocked, because often they've got a lot of bureaucracy or complicated platforms, etc., internally that they just can't overcome.
Yeah.
So it's a lot easier to get that from a partner, but who's the right partner for them?
It's an age-old question of when to build, when to buy, when to partner, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I guess when you look at issuer processes and, how, Visa works with them, you guys had to be really in step with your partners, right?
Yep.
Because you're driving the same high level of innovation constantly, but you've got to do it together. You've got to basically educate all of your partners and make sure that they have all of the different products and features that you guys have under VAS.
And it's about raising awareness to them of what our direction is, what's on our roadmap, what's our vision, and then bringing everybody as an ecosystem on that journey.
And I think just obviously being a partner of Visa, to all of our listeners, I think that is absolutely key. Work with Visa to say, look, what is in your roadmap? How do we work together? How do we drive innovation? How do we resell these products that we are, it's a one-to-many kind of relationship, right?
Yep.
So I think that is absolutely critical and key to all of our success.
Yep.
So Thomas, let's talk about product design. Features like flex cards, card controls, and subscription managers are helping to change utility into engagement. How are these kinds of product decisions changing the way issuers approach card programs?
I think it depends a bit on the kind of issuer, right? You have the more forward-leaning, the more innovator kinds of issuers who are often also more open to putting this together themselves. And then you have the more late majority kinds of issuers who needs more help both in identifying the opportunities as well as figuring out how to implement this and integrate this. Because of the complexity, I mean, if you want to implement a new service, you have to discover it and understand it, and then also open up a project, and you need to do onboarding of certifications and backend integration, mobile integration. So you basically need to involve 4, 5, 6 different teams in the bank, right? So we do see quite a search for our solutions where we provide them, for instance, a mobile SDK that is configurable, so you can basically turn on and off different functionality. So we're doing the backend integration, we're doing the holding their hands in the Visa project, we're managing the certificates and the mandates. So now all the thing they need is basically the mobile development team. And that allows them to pick and choose and test new functionalities and experiment with their card programs in a rapid fashion that hasn't been possible in that sense before.
Yeah. I think it's really about issuers now focusing more on the experience rather than the back end. How do I make, all of the building blocks fit together? Because I think, one of the things that me and Wallet and Paymentology are doing are building those easy launch components, easy to implement, even Visa products. So they really can pick and choose and decide how they want it to look, right?
I also think the issuers can then focus on what they're good at.
Yes.
And then they can rely on the partner to do what they're good at. And it takes a lot of the stress away from them, because it's not just the implementation of new products, but it's then operationally, when it's live. If you do that in-house and you do it yourself, you need to resource, you need to have that on an ongoing basis.
Yeah.
If you find the right partner, then actually it takes a lot of headache away from you.
And I think when you look at it, right, it's all about making sure that you do your part with excellence.
Yes.
Right? And even if that is a small part in the value chain, if you do it with excellence, that means that your customers don't have to worry about it. That's a piece that you're taking on. They can focus on the more important things like the customer experience.
Exactly. Rather than trying to be a jack of all trades.
Exactly. And what is it? Jack of all trades and master of none.
That's it. Yes.
Carl, Visa works with a variety of use cases, from traditional banks to neos and embedded players. How are your partners thinking about products in a way that balances innovation and user trust?
I think you touched on it earlier that there's no like one size fits all in terms of card programs. So we see a lot of bespoke programs that are dedicated towards a segment. So
Yes.
whether that will be, I mentioned a child card earlier, or you have cards that are more focused at a specific kind of demographic, etc. So you see a lot of that now. I think the reliability is always the same. Like you need in the background for that transaction and all of everything that's encompassed around it to still be reliable, because
Yes.
everybody expects your experience to be as seamless as possible. And that's never going to change. Actually, it's becoming more and more of a benchmark.
Yes.
And I'm sure we've all seen the news with some of the issues with some of the banks around outages and
Yes.
stuff. So it's definitely been in the news, especially in the UK, the last kind of 6 months or so. And so I think everyone's even more kind of conscious of that reliability
Heightened
aspect.
awareness.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I wanted to highlight, so we were actually testing a Visa Direct transaction yesterday.
Okay.
Thomas said something that, I didn't really think about it because, again, being on the partnership side, I look more at the experience, whereas you look more at technical. And so I was sending money to my sister in South Africa. And I was like, oh, it's literally like 4 or 5 clicks and I'm done. And he was like, in the background, do you know how many checks are being done to check the currency conversion rate? And I was like, you're right. Like, it's been made so easy for a consumer. But in the background, it's like 10 APIs or something, right?
There's all these validations, and that's also one of the things where I see it's both ourselves and Visa plays an important role. Visa obviously enables a lot of stuff, but also we're very good at guiding the issuers. And I see that as part of our role as well, right? Because, yeah, as I told you yesterday, I've seen implementations of Visa Direct where they're taking the user through the API journey.
Yeah.
And that's not a pretty sight, right? Because on one screen, you need to do so many things in the background to make it invisible for the user so that they don't even notice that you're doing this balance check or currency check or, KYC or stuff like that. That should just happen.
Yeah.
The user should just have the experience that you had yesterday.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point, because like we all know, and your listeners are all in the payment industry, but when you speak to your friends that are not in the industry,
Yeah.
or even
They have no idea.
my wife, for example, they just have no idea of what happens in the background.
Yeah.
So actually trying to explain what your job is and who you work with, and then they didn't even know there was someone behind making that as seamless as possible, kind of shows that everyone just takes it for granted.
They really do. I just got a message from my sister saying, thanks for the gift. And I was like, oh, I was just testing something. But the funds reached her so quickly, I didn't even have a chance to tell her that I was sending it. I mean, that experience is just so seamless. It's fantastic.
I'm a bit disappointed that test was on your sister, not to me, but
The next time I test it out. Now I want to look at Visa Intelligent Commerce for Agents, a look ahead. One of the most buzzed about concepts right now, and I think our CPO talks about it all the time, is agent-driven commerce. AI agents making purchases on our behalf.
Yep.
It's forward-looking, but the foundations are being laid today. So, Carl, one of the most forward-looking moves we've seen recently is Visa's Intelligent Commerce for Agents. While you're not on the project directly, can you help us to unpack what it signals for the future in issuing, especially in the context of AI agents?
Yeah, I mean, we're super excited about this one. We definitely think the industry is going in that way. We already see AI being used on risk and fraud products, for example, so definitely not a new thing. I think it's all about creating that framework of how it's going to work, and then establishing that, kind of similar to how e-com was kind of 20 years ago or so. Market's going to go that way. It's important as a framework, and how is it going to work? You've got things like passkeys and token, and that security element that's going to become even more kind of prevalent. But no, definitely something that's going in that direction. Funny enough, when we announced it, and Jack, I don't know if you saw, but when Jack was announcing it, our CPO, the use case that he refers to is actually the most common one, and I had it on the weekend, where you're looking at holidays, and you're using AI to get you all of but then you have no way to pay. That's such a common example that everybody uses and does all of this research, and now that you've got AI, it's easy to do the research, but you still have no mechanism to actually then make
to
the
actually
payment.
trigger it.
Yeah.
That autonomous payment say, okay, I've selected my holiday, just do the payment in the
Yeah.
background, right?
And I know I'm repeating a use case that he mentioned, but it's a use case that everybody experiences.
Yeah. No, I've experienced it as well because I'm like, yeah, I have my holiday. Okay, how do I pay for it? How do I get it?
I was literally looking on the weekend.
Yeah.
So I've gone through it myself literally like 3 days ago.
Summer is coming.
Exactly. Yeah, we need to go away from the UK because
Yes.
there's not so much sun here. In England, we definitely have this scenario quite a bit.
Yeah.
We're really, really excited. I feel like the market already knows that AI, it's just how can they incorporate AI?
Yeah. It's about being intentional with AI and using
Exactly.
it in the right ways. But also, my love of AI is, okay, definitely just the amount of information that you get in a concise way. But it's also just making people's lives easier.
Yeah.
That's at a very basic level.
But maintaining it's still a secure way of doing it.
Yes.
And that the AI isn't doing what you don't want it to do. So that's where this framework is
This
coming.
is why rules are important.
Exactly.
And Thomas, there's a tokenization angle here as well, right? AI agents will need unique context-specific tokens. How are you preparing for the shift, and how do you see tokenization evolving from a security layer to an intelligent control mechanism?
First and foremost, I just have to say that when I read the news about agentic commerce, I was very, very excited about it. I honestly think that it's probably the largest shift we've seen in payments since introduction of tokenization. Something that many people don't kind of recognize because it's so hidden, right? But introduction of tokenization has enabled us so many things that people don't even fathom. And in parallel, the networks have been working on introducing so many additional layers. You mentioned passkeys, and there are transaction controls and token level controls, etc. And it's now kind of all coming together in a way. And when you combine all of those innovations, now you have something that can be secure enough and functional enough that you can trust a machine to go shopping on your behalf.
Yeah.
And that's what was really important, right? Because the AI agents will get specific tokens with specific limitations. And where today issuers are, I think our average 4 or 5 tokens per pan across our issuers. This will probably explode. I mean, I expect both because of e-commerce, but then also AI agents, that this will be, 100 tokens per pan, which means that issuers need to completely rethink how they are considering, provisioning requests and control mechanisms. So it will be extremely important that the issuers, now that they have truly embedded tokenization and logic of how to respond to this AI agent requesting a token specifically for this and this and that, and versus that AI agent asking for this versus an Apple Pay tokenization request, right? Because these cannot be managed the same way.
Yeah.
So it will be extremely important for the issuers to make sure that they use a system that is configurable and capable enough to do this based on rules, based on dynamic feeds, based on,
And I think you're right that configurability is so important. You can't build bespoke, rules for each individual issuer. You have to have a platform that is capable of that scaling, right? And that's absolutely key. I want to touch more on control. So if you look at control, trust, and infrastructure readiness, because I think this is also a key part in how we make this all work. Issuers do need to innovate fast, but not recklessly. Building trust and ensuring control and getting the infrastructure right are key to enabling the future we've just discussed, right? Carl, when you think about issuer readiness, particularly in emerging experiences like delegated payments or intelligent agents, what infrastructure capabilities do you think will be critical?
Everybody's moving to the cloud already. So from an infrastructure perspective, if you haven't moved yet, you're at least considering to move there and as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Because if not, you're going to be left behind.
Mm-hmm.
So see that conversation all of the time. And I think it's just that reliability of the platform. I think now when issuers have conversations with outsourced partners, it maybe 5-10 years ago, it was cost first, then tech second.
Yes.
Now it's completely switched. Now it's, I want to evaluate your complete tech stack and the infrastructure. And I want to see that it's a scalable infrastructure. And then if I'm happy with that, it comes to the cost at the end. And that kind of shows the importance of that kind of infrastructure and its scalability, because ultimately, if you have issues with your infrastructure and reliability, you're going to lose customers.
Absolutely.
And then that's where the brand damage, that's where the financial losses and etc. happen. So you can't really take a punt on somebody, you really need to be sure.
You can't skimp on the tech.
Exactly.
And I mean, that was one of the reasons why, getting your virtual cloud connect in Europe was so important to Paymentology, right?
Yep.
It really was a part of that cloud first strategy to say, look, scalability is key. And if we look at, bringing in the tokenization angle, it's really about saying, look, we're going to have double, triple the amount of tokens, double, triple the amount of transactions on these tokens with, configurability built in at the very base layer. So making sure that really fast computing is absolutely critical, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it makes sure that you can quickly throw up an instance of a
Yes.
cloud connection, or you're not relying on physical infrastructure in one region and processing transactions in another one, which then
Yes.
you're relying on the transaction processing time, because there's obviously
Exactly.
impacts on that. So definitely speak to every partner about cloud. That's always, when we talk about infrastructure, cloud is always the first topic in that conversation.
And I mean, Thomas, we were talking about this yesterday, right? Mia Wallet built in the cloud from the very start. Was that a strategic decision, or was that just part of the way you wanted to build the platform from the very start?
We had global ambitions from the very beginning. The company was founded in Norway. It's it's a population size of a medium city in the US, right? So we had to think globally, and luckily, AWS existed already, so we could start thinking about that. But yeah, definitely we see it's crucial. I mean, today we're supporting issuers on 5 different continents, 60 different countries, and making sure that latency is low and that, you have the availability and resilience that is expected today is just crucial.
And from the processing side, now you obviously wear 2 hats at Paymentology and Mia Wallet. How do issuers try and balance speed with stability / infrastructure? How are you helping them build agile but compliant platforms?
That's part of the core idea of what we're trying to do, right? As we touched on previously, there are so many great services and so many great offerings available to issuers, but that also makes it a bit difficult for them to navigate and to consider what to implement and how to implement it, etc. And that's how we see our role as an abstraction layer that can make it easier for them, and we can manage the infrastructure part of it, the scalability part of it, and we can manage to simplify the APIs or even provide them SDKs so they don't even have to think about the APIs, to just use the mobile SDK. So I see that, as a key part of what we are doing. That
So rethinking how you enable issuers to issue. So with SDKs, micro front end, easy launch components, all of those key things, right? So you're driving that easy access to payments in a much better way.
Exactly. And no issuers are alike. So we've decided all of our services, and I think that's quite similar to what Visa does, right? We provide them as APIs. So you have full flexibility, you can manage everything, but it requires more effort. So then we also offer the SDKs. You've reduced the effort, but you're a bit more constrained. But then in our SDKs, we also have what we call the easy launch components or micro front ends, mobile micro front ends. So if you are fine with our guided, curated user journey, you can just define the visuals, but the main elements are already pre-built in our SDK. So basically, with 1 or 2 lines of code, you can add, a new card widget, a new functionality in your banking app. So it's about allowing the issuers to choose between, full control or full speed or anywhere in between, and also allow them to launch with full speed and gradually move over to full control as they mature.
I think that optionality is so interesting, right? Because every single issuer we speak to is like, I want to launch tomorrow. How do I launch before the end of the year, right? So speed is critical. But at the same time, as their customers evolve and the customers want that hyper personalization, they do need to take back more of that control to create a more individual experience, right? So I love that it's kind of customers are able to bounce between. I can use SDKs for something, I can use APIs for something else, I can use micro front ends for other things. That's really cool.
Yeah. You also need to, it's that balance between short-term and long-term strategy as well, because you can do something to get live as soon as possible, but then actually if that's not where you want to be, then you might have to make a significant.
Yeah.
So it's also about understanding what that is.
The future roadmap.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and having that optionality from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where they rely on like enablers like yourselves that are the experts and will be able to guide them in, okay, this is what you should be looking at.
Yeah. My experience is that often they have no idea at the beginning what they will want a year from now, right? So most of our clients come to us saying, hey, we need Apple Pay. We want to launch as soon as possible. We take them through some questions and ask them a bit, do you want this or that? Generally, the answer is, I don't care. Just, make sure that we follow Apple's strict guidelines and we will launch. They launch, they're live for a few months, and then they come back, hey, by the way, could we tweak this? Can we adjust that because we figured out this or we want? And I think that's really important that they can kind of, adjust this easily.
And that comes down to the optionality where they're not fixed into that day one solution and they can't change it. Then you're allowing them to grow on that journey that they've got.
Yes, this is why we all hate change requests. Configurability is the way forward. And talking about looking forward, let's zoom out for a final reflection. With everything changing from user behaviors to regulatory expectations, what's next in the world of issuing? To both of you, what's one unutilized product feature or infrastructure decision that more issuers should be thinking about right now if they want to really stand out? And I would say it within the next 12 to 18 months.
We've spoken about a lot of different products today. So I would say you mentioned the Flex card earlier. I mean, we believe that definitely is the direction of the market since we announced flexible credential. So definitely think that will be one. I actually think, I'm answering in a slightly different way. I actually think the ones who don't innovate will be left behind.
Agreed.
So I think it will be if you don't look at how can you keep up with that innovation, but etc., then you'll be left behind, but in a negative way, which is a slightly different take of the question. So apologies.
No, I think that's fantastic because you're right. It's no longer about loyalty. It's about how the features that you're giving customers access to.
Yeah.
And if they don't innovate, customers will move. That's the reality.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it's very important for everyone to acknowledge that reality.
And then you'll stand out, but in not the way that you want to stand out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're the what not to do.
Exactly.
And the bar is constantly moving, right? So what was good enough today is not good enough tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope it's not tomorrow. Maybe it's 18 months. Thomas, from you, what do you think underutilized products?
Next 12 to 18 months in banking, that's short term, right? I think I'll go with transaction controls. I think it's a very, very strong offering that is heavily underutilized. And again, because of the shift towards tokenization, and we're moving towards a short-term future where basically all cars stored on file or all e-commerce transactions will be tokenized.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you can do transaction controls on a token level, that essentially means that you can put into the hands of the cardholder a merchant level transaction control or spend limits or spend alerts. So for all parents out there who are frustrated that their kid has bought, green jewels in some game for $4,000, that can actually quite easily be stopped, right? Or you can even, on my Garmin phone, having a nights out with my mates, I can, put a limit, so make sure I don't spend too much. It is possible today, but too few issuers have actually bothered implementing this.
Yeah, not wide enough. I definitely need that on my Amazon account.
I'm laughing because I literally had that example on holiday where my son was buying stuff for my wife's iPad.
Oh no, V-Bucks.
So, yeah.
What is the V-Buck limit?
It was on like Minecraft. So I
Oh,
definitely
no.
experienced that firsthand recently.
I think this is every parent's dream.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, let's finish with a sentence. Complete this in your own words. I'm not going to put any in your mouth. The future of issuing belongs to those who... ...
Don't stand still. Make bold decisions around innovation and pick the right partnerships.
Definitely be decisive.
Be
Love
decisive.
that. Thomas?
The future belongs to those who build fast.
Mm-hmm. Love it. So decisive and fast, but do something. Move, right? And that brings us to the end of this episode of the Issuer Academy. A huge thank you to Carl and Thomas for sharing their insights and reminding us that great card products are built at the intersection of infrastructure, intelligence, and intent. Catch you next time on the Issuer Academy. That wraps up today's episode of the Issuer Academy. Paymentology's podcast to innovate, scale, and provide impact. I hope you're leaving with fresh insights and actionable strategies to help you revolutionize your card programs and drive true impact in the world. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, please leave a review to help us reach more pioneers like you. Also, be sure to subscribe and follow us for more inspiring episodes and behind-the-scenes content from Paymentology. Until next time, I'm Merusha Naidu. Keep innovating, keep scaling, and keep striving to make an impact.